Hey guys, hope everyone out there is doing well. Today, I thought I would talk about something else that is related to life in the Philippines and maybe not so much specifically expat, but some expat issues, but some things that go on in Filipino families that or go on in some Filipino families that you should be aware of. And specifically, pardon, I remember not too long ago, maybe it's been a while now. Pardon. I talked about I made a video called "When Giving Gets Abused," and what I was talking about in that video is that I really respect the Filipino culture of sharing, but there are times in which it gets toxic, specifically for the breadwinner. And what I talked about in that video is sometimes what happens is you have one or two breadwinners and everybody expects so much from the breadwinner, from someone who is earning a little money, that instead of that one person that's earning money being able to lift him or herself up, he or she just gets pulled down, and people don't even appreciate what he or she is doing. And today's video is kind of related to that because I've also talked about OFWs before, overseas Filipino workers. If you have any interaction whatsoever with Filipino culture and Filipinos, you'll know that the OFW phenomenon is a huge thing. In other words, thousands of Filipinos go overseas because the pay rate is so much better in other parts of the world. I've mentioned that my wife did this. My wife could make more working basically as I guess you would say, a waitress or a server in Macau than she could as an executive assistant to a CEO in the Philippines. So, but what I wanted to talk about specifically today was a combination of these two ideas: giving being abused, and OFWs, and that's where we get to broke OFWs. Because it is not unusual for a Filipino or a Filipina to go overseas, be earning maybe a better salary than he or she would in the Philippines, and yet spend years doing this and yet end up completely broke. No money at all. Nothing to show for the sacrifice they made of going overseas. Nothing to show for the time they've spent away from their family and the hard work they've put in. And how does this happen? Well, it happens in two ways. First and foremost, it goes back to this whole when giving gets abused, in that in some families, when someone goes overseas, the family everyone starts asking for money. And so it's not just, okay, I'm going to help my younger sibling through college. Everybody basically approaches the person who's working overseas as if they have just an unlimited supply of money. And so as you can imagine, if the OFW, this Filipino that's working overseas, cannot say no to anyone, then he or she will go broke pretty quickly because, again, everybody will approach him or her, will start sending us. And it's worse now if you think about it with Facebook and email. Everybody approaches the OFW with their hands out in some families, in some situations. And I have known of this happen to, my wife and I have talked to Filipinos here in the U.S. that have basically almost strangers asking them for money, people that they went to high school with, and suddenly, pardon for all this coughing by the way, and suddenly everybody's approaching them. Oh, you're my old classmate. I see you're in America now. Can I borrow some money for whatever? And so, as you can imagine, it doesn't take too many people before your resources can be exhausted pretty quickly. So that's part of it. OFWs go broke because there are just too many people expecting them to give too much money. But then there's a flip side to this, and this is kind of ironic, but in some cases it gets even worse when the OFW comes home to visit, because there can be a cultural expectation that, okay, when you've been off, let's say you've been off in working in Kuwait or Singapore, and you come back home to your family, to your mom's house or whoever, and there's often an expectation that, number one, you're going to throw a party. And in Filipino culture, sometimes this can get taken to the extreme to where the OFW comes home and feels like he or she needs to basically feed the whole barangay. I mean, just huge blowout. And then on top of this blowout that he or she may do, then they come home, and the problem I talked about with people having their hands out for money, guess what? It doesn't stop when they come home. In some cases, it gets worse. And everybody knows, oh, this guy's come home, this girl's come home from Singapore, from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from wherever, from Qatar. And I'm sure they have all this money with them, so I'm going to come and ask them if I can borrow some money. And so again, what can happen is, if you have a Filipino or a Filipina who does not have any sense of personal boundaries, who cannot say no to friends and family that ask for money, they'll go completely broke. And so it's just something that I thought I would share with you and make you aware of. And even, I would say, for my Filipino viewers out there who are blessed with the opportunity to go abroad, to go somewhere else to earn money, if you don't learn some boundaries, if you give money to everyone who asks of you, and you don't learn how to save a little bit and put a little bit aside for your own future, you'll come back with nothing. So just something that's kind of been on my mind over the past few months. It's something that I've meant to write about or meant to talk about before, because I've seen this happen a lot. And for my Filipino viewers who go overseas, please don't let it happen to you. For my fellow expats that are watching this, be aware that this is something that does happen in some families. And again, as I always say, I'm not trying to stereotype every Filipino family, because this does not happen in every Filipino family. But it does happen a good bit, particularly when you have families that are maybe really poor or really don't know how to manage money. So just thought I would share that.